The producer of the Family Matters saw the film and a screening, and he called me and asked me did I want to come in and do...
Pulling out the old Family Matters tapes going, a lot of people don't realize how different, how similar I am to Kramer. This character is proof to me that cool is what you make of it.
Every Friday night, 30 million viewers sat down with what they believed was the happiest family on television. None of them knew the cast resented each other so deeply the breakout star nearly fought his own TV mother on set, that the youngest daughter was erased and ended up in adult films, or that one of them was quietly dying while performing comedy every week. This is what they hid. Number 1, the accident. The entire show, all 9 seasons of it, traces back to a woman who operated an elevator. Jo Marie Payton played Harriet, a recurring character on a completely different sitcom called Perfect Strangers. She showed up, delivered a few lines, got a laugh, and went home. But she was so effortlessly funny in that small role that producers William Bickley and Michael Warren decided to build an entire show around her home life. That's how the third longest-running sitcom with a predominantly African-American cast got started. Because an elevator operator was too magnetic to waste, they cast Reginald VelJohnson, fresh off Die Hard, as her husband Carl. The show premiered September 22, 1989. It was warm, it was funny, and for a few months, it belonged entirely to her. But if the show was built around Peyton, how did she end up losing it to a 12-year-old who was only supposed to appear once? Number 2, the 12-year-old who ate the show alive. Steve Urkel was designed to last 1 episode. The writers needed a nerd to ask Laura Winslow to a school dance. A punchline with legs. 1 and done. Jaleel White was 12 years old. He walked in, put on the glasses, did the voice, and something happened in the room that nobody had planned for. During the taping, a fraternity in the studio audience started chanting his name between scenes. Not during his moments. Between them. Every time the show cut to a storyline without this kid, the audience wanted him back. The producers noticed. They wrote him into the next episode. Then the next. By season 2, White was in the opening credits. They even reshot the season 1 promos to include him, as if he had been there from the beginning. Before Urkel, Family Matters pulled decent numbers. After Urkel, it was hitting 30 million viewers on a Friday night. The character didn't just boost the show, he consumed it, and the people who had built the show from nothing were watching their storylines disappear, one by one. Every storyline Urkel gained was a storyline someone else lost. So if 30 million viewers were watching the happiest family on television, what were the actors actually saying to each other when the cameras stopped rolling? Number 3. If you're not happy here. They held meetings, actual sit-down meetings with the producers, behind closed doors, about the fact that their show was being hijacked. Jo Marie Payton and Reginald VelJohnson, the 2 leads, the reason the show existed, went directly to the showrunners and said, in essence, this was supposed to be our show. Nothing changed. Thelma Hopkins, who played Aunt Rachel, confirmed in a 2025 interview that the friction was impossible to miss. She was there for all of it, and she didn't sugarcoat what she saw. But what happened to VelJohnson was worse than being ignored. According to Jaleel White's 2024 memoir, Growing Up Urkel, when VelJohnson expressed his frustration to showrunner Thomas Miller, Miller essentially told him that if he wasn't happy, he was free to leave. The cast heard about it and repeated the line back to VelJohnson for years as a bitter running joke. The man playing the father of the Winslow family had just been told by his own showrunner that he was replaceable. VelJohnson stayed anyway. He appeared in every single episode across all 9 seasons. And White? He wasn't oblivious to the hostility. In his memoir, he wrote that the original cast never welcomed him. He described adult co-stars making him break down in tears during a table read. He was 12, 13 years old, and the people playing his TV family were letting him feel, in ways that were not subtle, that his presence was a problem they hadn't asked for. Hopkins raised another issue that stung the cast differently. Urkel's behavior on the show, barging into the Winslow home without knocking, calling the grandmother Estelle by her first name, violated basic cultural norms in black households. Hopkins pointed out that in a real black home, nobody addresses the matriarch by her first name because it's disrespectful. The writers didn't understand the culture they were depicting. The cast noticed every time. The adults fought back and lost, but at least they were still on the show. The youngest member of the Winslow family wasn't as lucky, and what happened to her after the cameras stopped is one of the hardest parts of this story to hear. Number 4. The Girl Who Went Upstairs. Jamie Foxworth was 10 years old when she was cast as Judy Winslow, the youngest daughter of the family. For 4 seasons, she was part of the household, present, visible, a Winslow. Then, near the end of season 4, in an episode called Mama's Wedding, Judy walked upstairs. She never came back down. The show gave her no goodbye, no storyline, no acknowledgement that the Winslows had ever had a third child. One episode she was there. The next, she wasn't. The writers never mentioned her again. The family went from 3 kids to 2, and the show kept going as if she had never existed. Foxworth was 13. She later told The Root that the producers believed they could cut her and nobody would notice. They figured they could throw her away without explanation. Some of her cast members found out before she did. Jo Marie Payton went to the producers and argued that cutting a child from the show without reason was wrong. It didn't work. Urkel needed more space. Judy didn't generate enough storylines to justify her salary. She was gone. After being cut, Foxworth tried to go back to being a normal kid. She enrolled at Burbank High School. Acting work never came. She went from being on one of the most watched shows in America to being completely invisible in the span of a single summer. Her family's money ran out. Her parents burned through her trust fund paying bills. By the time she was 19, broke and directionless, 6 years removed from the only career she'd ever known, she entered the adult film industry under the name Crave. She was 19. She had been a professional actress since she was 10. And nobody from the show that made her famous reached out. The substance abuse followed. First, then substances. In 2008, she appeared on Celebrity Rehab. The girl who had once been a Winslow was now being filmed in a treatment facility, trying to put her life back together on camera, because that was the only kind of camera still pointed at her. Then, in 2017, Entertainment Weekly organized a Family Matters reunion photo shoot. The surviving cast showed up. Vel Johnson, Payton, Williams, McCrary, White, Harrison, James, Hopkins. They even included a framed photo of the late Rosetta Lenoir, who had played Mother Winslow and died in 2002. Jamie Foxworth was not invited. She was not contacted. She didn't know it was happening until co-star Sean Harrison sent her a text 2 days before the cover dropped, just so she wouldn't be blindsided when she saw it. A dead woman made it onto that set. The living woman who spent 4 years as part of the family did not. Foxworth called it a slap in the face. She believed the exclusion was because of her time in adult films. She pointed out that she wasn't the first person to do adult films and wouldn't be the last, so using that as a reason to cut her out of a reunion didn't hold up. The show erased her in 1993. The industry was still erasing her 24 years later. But if Foxworth paid the highest price for Urkel's rise, what was happening to the kid playing Urkel? Because the audience watched something happen to Jaleel White over 9 seasons that they never fully understood. Number 5. Growing up inside a costume that stopped fitting. While the cast fought about screen time, Jaleel White was dealing with something nobody else on the show had to think about. He was going through puberty inside a character designed for a 12-year-old. Urkel's signature nasal voice, the thing that made 30 million people laugh every week, was produced by a child whose voice hadn't broken yet. By the middle seasons, White's natural register had dropped significantly. Maintaining the voice became physically painful, his vocal cords under constant strain from forcing a pitch his body had outgrown. But without that voice, Urkel wasn't Urkel, so White kept doing it, season after season. Then the wardrobe, the hiked-up pants, the suspenders, all of it designed for a skinny kid. As White's body matured, the costume became a problem that made executives uncomfortable. In his memoir, he recalled producers telling him to wear looser pants because his body was showing in ways the show couldn't broadcast. He compared getting out of the Urkel jeans to peeling a banana. By season 9, White was 21. He had spent 9 years trapped inside a character built for a child. The glasses, the voice, the walk, all of it, a performance that started as a one-episode gag and had consumed his entire identity. So what happens when 9 years of physical strain meets 9 years of cast resentment on a set that's already falling apart? Number 6. The Fight Joe. Marie Payton wanted out for years. She had an 8-season contract. A BC wouldn't release her. When the show moved to CBS for its 9th and final season, CBS made her an offer with an unusual clause. She could walk away after the first half of the season was filmed. She took it, but before she left, something happened that crystallized everything the show had been bottling up. During the filming of an episode where White was playing his character's gangster cousin OGD, he wanted to do something in a scene that Payton knew would be rejected by the network's Standards and Practices department. She told him it wouldn't fly. He disagreed. The argument escalated. White started kicking and screaming on set. Then he used a word Payton didn't recognize, melee, and when she asked what it meant, he told her it meant a fight. Payton turned around. If he wanted a fight, she was ready to give him one. Darius McCrary physically stepped between them. Payton later said she was fully prepared to handle him herself if McCrary hadn't intervened. This was a 21-year-old man, and the woman who had played his TV mother for 9 years, standing on a set built to look like a family living room, ready to put hands on each other. That is how deep the fracture had gone. Payton left the show after that stretch. Judy Elder was brought in to play Harriet for the final 8 episodes. Vel Johnson compared it to getting a divorce and immediately remarrying someone else. McCrary said it felt like his mother was gone. Not the character, the person. The show never got a proper finale. Family Matters just ended. July 1998. CBS didn't renew it. But all the fighting, the politics, the egos, all of that was happening on the surface. What nobody on set realized was that someone in the cast had been carrying something far worse in silence the entire time. Number 7. The One Who Never Said a Word. This is the part of the story that changes tone completely, because unlike the jealousy and the politics and the ego, this one has no villain, only loss. Michelle Thomas joined Family Matters in 1993 as Myra Monkhouse, Steve Urkel's girlfriend. She brought something the show desperately needed, a character who looked at Urkel not as an annoyance, but as someone worth loving. Her father was a founding member of Kool and the Gang. At 15, she had been crowned Miss Talented Teen International. In August of 1997, Thomas was diagnosed with intra-abdominal desmoplastic small round cell tumor, a cancer so rare that most oncologists will never see a single case in their entire career. She had surgery to remove a lemon-sized growth, and then she went back to work. She didn't tell her co-stars. She didn't mention it on set. Jaleel White said years later that nobody on the show knew anything about her condition while they were filming. She was performing comedy on a sitcom set while carrying a diagnosis that most people would struggle to say out loud. After Family Matters ended, Thomas landed a role on The Young and the Restless. In October of 1998, a second cancerous growth ruptured. Emergency surgery followed. She flew home to New Jersey to spend Thanksgiving with her family. On December 23, 1998, exactly 3 months after her 30th birthday, Michelle Thomas died at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan, surrounded by her family. Malcolm Jamal Warner, her former boyfriend from her Cosby Show days, was at her bedside. There is one detail from her story that is almost impossible to move past. According to accounts from people close to her, after being diagnosed, Thomas initially resisted certain treatments because she was afraid they would destroy her ability to have children. She chose to protect the future she still hoped for, even as the disease was taking it away. She was 30 years old. She never complained. She never let anyone see it. Number 8. What the cameras left behind. The years after 1998 were not gentle to the people who made Family Matters. Darius McCrary, the lovable Eddie Winslow, saw his career slow to a crawl. But it was his personal life that made the worst headlines. His marriage collapsed amid allegations of domestic violence. By 2024, he owed over $95,000 in back child support. In October 2025, he was arrested at the U.S.-Mexico border on a fugitive warrant and held without bail. $95,000. A fugitive warrant, a jail cell with no bail. That's where Eddie Winslow ended up. Jamie Foxworth rebuilt. She got sober during her pregnancy in 2008, welcomed a son, and has since lived a deliberately quiet life advocating for child actor protections. She made it through what the industry did to her, though calling it survival barely captures the cost. Jaleel White graduated from UCLA. He turned down a Family Matters reboot because the producers offered him a blind contract with no script, no creative input, and half the pay he'd earned when the show ended. He said publicly that he had no interest in a cash grab. In 2024, he published Growing Up Urkel, his answer to a decade of co-stars telling their version of events without him in the room. Bryton James, who played Little Richie, landed a long-running role on The Young and the Restless that continues to this day. The same show Michelle Thomas had joined just before she died. And Vel Johnson? He never stopped working. Smaller roles, convention appearances. He has never been married. He has no children. The man who played one of the most beloved TV fathers in American history went home to an empty house every night after the cameras turned off. The personal wreckage is real. But with everything that went wrong behind the scenes, it's easy to miss something the show actually did on screen that was decades ahead of its time. Number 9. The episode nobody talks about. In Season 5, Family Matters aired an episode called Good Cop, Bad Cop. Eddie Winslow is driving home, gets pulled over by 2 white police officers, and the stop escalates for no reason other than what he looks like. He is roughed up, humiliated, left shaken on the side of the road.
People were driving by looking at me like I was a criminal, and I didn't even do anything.
This aired in 1994, 26 years before the murder of George Floyd turned the phrase driving while black into a national conversation. A full decade before anyone outside activist circles was using the term racial profiling on mainstream television. And here's what made the episode land harder than anything else the show ever did. Carl Winslow, the show's moral anchor, was himself a police officer. The episode forced him to confront the reality that his own profession could be a threat to his own son, a cop whose child isn't safe from other cops. That contradiction wasn't softened. It was handled with a directness that most prestige dramas wouldn't attempt for another 2 decades. Family Matters gets remembered for catchphrases and falling over furniture. It deserves to be remembered for this. Number 10. What it all means. There will never be a real Family Matters reunion. White turned down the reboot. Peyton has boundaries. McCrary's legal situation makes his involvement nearly impossible, and the show drifted so far from its origins that going back would feel dishonest, and continuing would feel absurd. The ending it actually got, a different actress playing the mother, a final season on a different network, no farewell episode, might be the most honest thing about Family Matters. It didn't get a bow, it got the truth. But here's what stays. The little girl who was erased survived. The young man the cast resented became the reason the show is remembered at all. The woman who hid her illness gave performances so complete that nobody could tell she was dying. And a Friday night sitcom aimed at children aired an episode about police brutality that the rest of American television needed 26 more years to catch up to. Drop a comment and tell me, did you know any of this? If this hit different, subscribe. We've got more of these coming, and some of them go even deeper.